Hello, my name's Dr. Darren Cannell, and I will be doing this lesson this evening. And what this lesson is all about is it's a drawing lesson, and it's learning how to draw on a tablet. And so what I'll be doing is we're projecting here up on the wall. It'll be a little bit washed out, but at least you'll be able to see the tools that we're using. This is Sketchbook Pro, and so we'll be working with a program called Sketchbook Pro. And I'm hoping that you enjoy this and that you will get to see how we go about the process of doing this. And we will start right at 6 o'clock. And so I hope you can follow along, and it'll be approximately 2 hours long. And so enjoy. And what I'll do is I have 5 different students that'll be here, and we'll be sitting around a table. They all bring their own tablet and their own pencil, and we will do a drawing right from scratch. This one that you see up on the wall, this is one that we did last week. And so I'd like you to just take a look at a couple different things here. If I go to this, I'm not too sure if this helps any, but we will tend to work a little bit a little bit darker. And maybe if I just open up some of the doors around, it'll give us a better view and maybe a little bit more light outside and then on the outside. And so this will just possibly the way we'll set it up so that we can get some light coming in here. And will give us something to work with. So the program, I've done some classes before, and so you'll have to bear with me as I try to get the settings correct and the things that will make it easier to see what we're doing and what lighting situation is the best and which one works the best. And so we will work on trying to get it set up so it's at the best feature. And so I will come back on in a few minutes. And so actually I'll just let it run, and I'll just turn off the microphone so people can just log on and get in here and watch. If the okay, we'll start in about 6 minutes. We'll start in about 6 minutes, and so I'm just going to gather up all the students and get them to come on in, and we'll see what we can set up and get this drawing moving. But until then, play with Sketchbook Pro. Just take a look at some of the tools down the side. These tools you can change, and you can put whichever ones you want in there, and so that makes it fairly handy. But I'll throw out a whole pile of little hints. We have class last week, and so from now on I'll try to make sure that we do a live studio each time, and so that different people can follow along as we're drawing. And so the drawing that we're going to do today is in the style of a group of 7. A guy named Harris, I think his name was, and he does a very stylized landscape. And so one of the ladies that we have in the class is very interested in learning how to do landscapes for her cartoon drawings, and so I'll be working on that. So I'll talk to you then. I hear one of the students coming, so I'm going to shut her So here's what we're going to do, you guys. We're going to start a new image. Have you guys ever heard of the Group of Seven? Group of Seven was a whole pile of Canadian artists way back in 1940s and 50s where they, I think it was back then, where they did a whole pile of landscape drawings, but they're very stylized. And so this was the one that we worked on last week, and we'll talk about that halfway through. I'll just like to see some of the things that you've done with it, if you have done any further work on it. If you're here last week, if you weren't, then welcome to this class, and we'll see what we can do. So we're working on Sketchbook Pro, and for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Darren Cannell. I am the art teacher for this class, and I will do my best to start a new drawing and give you something that will allow you to go home and work on the next one, or excuse me, to finish this one. And so we are doing a new drawing. And so you just go on into your program, Sketchbook Pro, and you want to do a new sketch. And I normally work on like 18 by 24s. So 1,800 by 2,400 pixels. And so you can see what size it is. And we're going to do a picture that's up and down like this. So it's in what you call a portrait style and not the landscape style. And so that's what we're going to do today. And so you just need to create that, and we're going to have a white background. The other students, when they get here, will just catch up. And so again, what we're going to try to do is we're going to do a little bit of a style that's very stylized. It's not going to be realistic. It's going to be more like a cartoony type mountain scene with a big evergreen tree in the front. And so that's going to be our goal. So you want to get to this stage where you have the big blank screen. And then we're going to work with a little bit of a blue sky, but going down into a yellow sky. So what you want to do is we want to work with this spray tool, better known as a flow airbrush. And the settings for it are as follows. We want it to be very big, and we want the opacity to be very high. If I'm moving too fast, you guys just stop and ask, and I'll give you some help on it. Okay, so that's where we're starting with. And then the color we're going to work with is we want to have a nice light blue sky at the very top. But we're going to move down into a yellow sky without it turning green, which is going to be kind of fun. And so the first layer that we're going to do is going to be light blue like this, and you've got a very big spray, and all you want to do is spray this top part of your picture. Make sure the size is big enough that it sprays nice and wide.
Wait, what's the app called?
The app?
Yeah.
Sketchbook Pro. So it's Autodesk Sketchbook. The question that was asked was, this is a program in the top left-hand corner. You can see it's called Sketchbook, and it's got that pencil on front of it.
All right.
You found it?
Yeah.
So that's the one that we're working on, Autodesk Sketchbook. And we are starting a new background, and we're just going to color this all in spray, blue, and around that range. We want this to be very big, the setting to be very big, and the opacity to be very high. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to make a darker blue sky, not a dark blue sky, just like a blue sky. And we're going to go down halfway down the page approximately. Hello. We're just starting, so. So no problem catching up. All we're doing is we're doing the background in the top part of the sky. Just trying to darken it in a little bit here. Hello. And so we go about halfway down, and you can see the way this is a layer, and you can see the layers on the right hand side. So you have one layer there, and then you have the background, which is just plain white. So we're working with a white background this time. Last time, remember when we were drawing, we decided to turn the background blue, and you can do the black, like you can change the background to any color you want.
So there's your blue background, but I don't want that. I want to work with a white background for this one. So we're just doing a stylized landscape here that is in the style of Mr. Harris, who was one of the group of 7, very famous Canadian artist. There's actually a picture in the art gallery, or was in the Mendel Art Gallery, that shows his style and the way he does things. So once we get to that, we're going to put a second layer on there. So here's another layer on top of it. And now we're going to put that one in as yellow. And so we want to put some yellow in, and we want it to be a fairly light yellow because later on we're going to try and make the two of them match. So this is just going to go from the side up to the top and back down, because we're going to put a mountain right in the very middle of our painting. So we're going like this. And what that'll do, you notice how using the softer color, you have a little bit of a shadow, not a shadow, but a blending in between the two. But because they're layers, they don't end up as green. So if you go to the first one and you put, sorry, I go to that first layer and I put this on here, you end up with a little bit more of a green and a little bit too much blending. So I wanted to remove that. And so we're going to start with the darker corners in your blue. So if you want to go back to your blue, you're going to put a little bit heavier of a blue color in there. So in around this range, just to follow the yellow. So notice how it's darker around in the corners now. And so I just made the corners a little bit darker. And then this yellow glow that will be part of like from the mountain. And the mountain will sit right down in that yellow. Yeah. Okay, how are we doing? People getting to that point? You okay? Okay. So I told some of the guys that were here to begin with, we're simulcasting at the same time. So we're actually sending this all over the internet. And so the people, like, that's what that computer's doing, is it's just sending out the information so other people can see it. And so if you have a question, don't be shy. It's 2 hours, and the people that are on there are just watching. They won't have any conversations or anything like that. They won't talk to us or anything. It's so that they can learn the same thing, because there's a few people out there who would like to learn how to do the drawing as well. And so we're at this stage where we have the yellow and we have the blue. The thing that they always talk about in physical painting, when you're using watercolors or oils, you always want to paint the thing that is farthest away first. And so that's what we're doing here with the layers too. The nice thing is that if I want the blue in front of the yellow, all I have to do is do this, and now my blue is in front of my yellow. And so you don't necessarily have to do them in the right sequence when you're doing digital drawing, but in actual painting, you want to make sure that you layer it like that. So you go one layer to the next layer. Okay? You okay?
Yeah, I'm trying to, yeah.
So now that we have the dark blue and we have the yellow, now what we're going to do is we're going to put a mountain in front of that. Now we're going to use the Harris style of painting the mountains. And so Harris styles of painting mountains it's very cartoony. And so here's what it's going to look like. We're going to get this big marker. And so this marker is like, it's just like a normal marker. And we're going to go with the blue that we have in the background. So we want the blue to match in the mountain with the sky. And then we're going to do a very stylized, make the flow heavy, make it very wet. And then we're going to make this very, oh, wrong layer, excuse me, guys. We're putting it on a layer underneath. I'm going to put it on a separate layer. So we're going on to the third layer. Sorry, I forgot to tell you to go another layer. So you see how dark this comes in? So it's a very dark and very stylized. So up, there's one mountain peak. And then we're going to put the second mountain peak on there, right in here. And the third one. And then we're going to go fourth one, go in this style. So you notice how they lean, one side leans one way, one side leans the other way. So it's a very stylized kind of mountain. And this was a trademark of the way Harris used to draw his mountains. And so then I'm going to go really lighter blue on the other side. So on this side of the mountain, I want some lighter blue. Then we're going to put some white on top of that. Not white, but lighter blue in order to start forming our mountains. And because this is a marker, we can put it on, it becomes very solid and very quickly. And then we're going to blend these two edges together by going to the blending tool. Now this is the one that we used last week, and you remember how I said I love this one? This is the round smudging tool, and I use it a lot in my drawings because I find it gives you a really nice effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here to the mountain. So once we've got the mountain on there with the marker, we're going to pull the mountain in close so you can see it, and then we're going to soften up some of the edges. And so the two of them sort of blend together, but you still have the very bold effect. So do you see how the colors start to blend together a little bit? And you just want to make the mountain a little bit more interesting to look at, so it doesn't have these straight lines. Lines are something that humans do. There's very few actual lines in nature unless we drew them. So there's a lot of times when people draw trees and stuff like that, they'll have a very solid line around the tree. It doesn't work that way. Like the lines normally are man-made abstractions, and they're not something that nature does. Nature has the blending where it blends together, and it may look like a nice sharp line, but you always want to have the background blending in there and the edges a little bit softer in nature. So the real sharp lines are normally something that we made. Like if you look at a tree, it doesn't really have real sharp edges. It's rounded normally. So a trunk isn't just like this straight line that goes straight up. It's always a rounded edge. And so all we're going to do is soften this up a little bit in order to create a mountain effect. So mountains are very broken up and very rugged. So that's all I'm doing here is just trying to blend it and try and give it a little bit more interest to look at rather than just having these straight lines. Nice thing about these kind of paintings is there's no right or wrong. You don't have to match exactly what I'm doing. You just sort of have to.
What settings do you for the podcast?
My smudge tool?
Yeah.
The question that was asked was what size, and so the size that I'm working with is I'm using a 16.6, and the flow and the strength that I'm using the smudge round bristle brush because I find that's the best one, or the one that I like the most.
Wait, can I see that again?
Of course. And so just the people on the internet out there, what I'm working with is a Sketchbook Pro. I'm using the Autodesk Sketchbook Pro as my app, but the actual thing that I'm drawing on is called a iPad Pro. It's the biggest one. I bought it in 2015, so it's an older tablet, but it seems to still work fine. So once in a while, the processor can't keep up with me, and you'll end up with some of the lines not being nice and smooth, but most of the time it has the ability to keep up with me. And then the other ones is you can do this class on a phone. You can do it on the tablets, the Amazon tablets. Wacom tablets are another one that you can buy that are very nice. The Apple Pencil, and it's the reason why I've gone to the iPads. I'm not a Macintosh or an Apple person per se. I tend to work with Google a lot and Chromebooks and the PC. But I found that the ability to be able to press harder using an Apple Pencil is a nice feature that you don't get on anything else other than a Wacom tablet. So that's why I'm using this this iPad. And again, because I'm old, I need something that's big so I can see it a little bit better than working on. I did draw some drawings on my phone, but I tend to go blind because I don't have young eyes like some of the people here. And so you can see the way I'm just smudging this into the background a little bit, just to give it a little bit more features that here we are in the mountains.
I can grab something.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and then remember that trick from last week? Take this layer and duplicate it, and it'll give you a little bit more color. So I've duplicated it 3 times, and then I'm just going to merge those 3 layers together. What it does is it just gives you a little bit more color to play with and a little bit more color to pull in different directions to create some of the interesting effects as far as the mountain goes. Not a mountain goat, the way the mountain goes. And so you can see the way the pattern, you sort of play with the pattern just to give it a feeling that one of the darkest edge in the middle here is coming towards you. And then it has this white edge that I'm drawing on now that comes off the side, and then there's another edge, and that's the dark. So the dark is the edge in the white, and the light blue is the snow-capped side of it. And so the idea then is to create a feeling, and you can see how the mountain is starting to come together where it looks like it's reaching up into the sky, and with the yellow around it, it sort of gives you that feeling that, okay, we've got a mountain. So how are we doing? Most people with me? Okay, so pretty well got that done. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go up into the sky. So we're going to take the mountain out. So once you get to this point, just delete the mountain. Not delete it, excuse me, just like hit that little sort of eye thing that is on the left-hand side, and it'll make it disappear. So you can make it appear or disappear. And so we're going to make it disappear, and then we're going to put in some clouds. So the clouds we're going to put into the blue and the yellow. We're going to merge the 2 of them together. So you see how these 2, this one and this one, you click on the one above, so the yellow one, because it's all going to be part of the sky, and then we're going to merge it down. Then you put in another layer by hitting the plus sign at the top, and that puts a second layer on top of that. And then we're going to create these real goofy looking clouds. So are you ready for that? Now the clouds we're going to go with a little bit whiter still. The light blue is okay, and it matches the mountains a little bit, or we're going to go even a little bit higher into the white, because we're going to smudge it into the background in time. And so here's what we're going to do with the mountains. Nice and solid. Again, we're using our marker. Nice and solid. Cloud. And what you're going to do is you're going to make it in layers like this so the background shows through it. Here's another one. Now, almost like the Simpson clouds, but a little bit solider than the Simpson clouds. So you just want to put some layers on there like this. And you can see how the background is shining through it, which is kind of cool. And again, this is one of those ones where, as Bob Ross will say, is there's no such thing as mistakes. They're just interesting features in your drawing. And so I'm allowing the background to show through in a lot of spots. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my smudge tool again and make these even a little bit more interesting by softening up the tops. And the spots where you see the background shining through, you're going to smudge this around, and then you're just going to create these clouds. So do you see how I lightened up the cloud? So it ends up not as this thing that looks like it's going to fall out of the sky, which is one of the, like a lot of Harris clouds when he was painting them, they're very solid and they look like there's no way that would be floating. What we want to do is we want to make ours a little bit more floaty, a little bit more flying saucerish. And so again, we're using this smudge tool just to soften up the edges where it, the outside edges of the cloud. And once we get that done, then we're going to come in with a little bit of a darker, so we can put some darker color on the bottoms of them. Now we have the light showing through in a lot of them and a lot of the cloud, and so that helps a lot to give it some texture. But again, mine at the moment are looking like a whole pile of flying saucers, so we're going to fix that. Now there's a couple of ways we can do that. One, we can start to pull in some of the color from the background, so then we have to merge these two, or you can paint the color right on. I'm more tempted to merge the two of them. So I'm just going to push this down and merge it to the one below. And now when I do this, the smudging, I can pull in the blue background right into the cloud itself. And you can see how it starts to make it a little bit more interesting to look at, because you can pull the blue across it with the smudging tool. And so now that cloud is not bad. There's a couple of different things that when you're painting, clouds, waves, you can overwork them, which means you could spend hours and hours trying to create the cloud just so it looks good. But what'll end up happening is that you'll end up with these things that look like bricks in the sky. So when you're doing clouds, you want to be very light with your pencil. You want to be very quick about it. And you don't want to dwell on it, because if you dwell on it, then your painting is going to end up very solid and very rock-looking clouds. You have these rocks in the sky. And so you want them to be wispy so it looks like the wind's blowing, because remember, these are on the top of a mountain, above a mountain. So you want them to lighten up a little bit and have this nice little soft feel to them. So you just keep wisping them around a little bit, make them nice and soft. And you have some clouds. Thanks. And so anytime you're doing this, the bottom of a cloud tends to be a little bit darker, but it's not always just at the very bottom. It can move up into the inside of it. And so that just gives your cloud a little bit of interest. And so you see how this one is on the middle, on the horizon between the yellow and the blue. So I'm pulling some of the blue down from up above, just because I want to change the shape of it a little bit. And then interest-wise, let's see what this looks like when you duplicate it. Do you see how it gets a little darker? So I've duplicated it a couple times, and then I'm going to merge them back together again. And now I've got a lot more color to play with. And then you want to soften up some of those edges again, because when you merge it, what ends up happening is the blue overpowers the white, or the white overpowers the blue. And what you want to do is get it wispy again, so it feels like it's going all over the place. So a nice soft little touch on them. Don't overwork them. And if you find that if you're creating too much of a variation in, take your opacity, your strength, and your flow way down. So you notice these settings that I've got there. So this is a round bristle. What I did is I softened the flow down to about a 5, strength down to about a 5 as well. So I softened it up a little bit, and then you'll see it has less effect on it, but it allows you to soften up those edges a lot. And so you can see how this, now the sky and the cloud is sort of blending together as you go through it. And so again, this will just soften it up a little bit. And then once we get a fair distance along there, we want to put the mountains back in and see whether or not those clouds are sort of playing with the mountains the way you want them to. And when I put my mountains back in there, I kind of like it the way it is. It kind of works well. Now I'm going to be drawn on the background, which always confuses people because you have the mountains in front. And so all I'm doing is softening up the way the clouds are hitting the mountains. And I'd like the cloud to overpower the mountain here on that one side. So I'm going to soften this part of the mountain so it almost looks like it's in the clouds. And the same thing here. I'm going to get this. Ready for the next layer, guys? We always want to keep moving forward and moving fairly quickly because you can finish off some of these layers as you get home, but we want to be able to have the foundation so that we can just sort of have it done enough so that we know what the heck we're doing. And so now we're going to do the foothills. And the foothills, you want to start with a real dark color. And again, you're back to your marker and you want to create foothills. And so the foothills are these smaller things that are in front. And the foothills are just going to look like this. And then it'll make sense here in a second once I get it on there.
Can I see the color real quick?
So you see the brown that I'm using? It's just all I did is went into the orange and then I just went into the darker area because, again, just like the mountain itself, we're going to go through a couple different color variations of it. So now I'm going to go up into here and I'm going to put this down, this color right in here as the other side of the mountain. Okay, so this is the side that goes this way. And so it's the other side of the mountain.
And can I see the
This one?
settings?
The settings for this?
Yeah.
42, flows high, 82, wetness is 81.
82 and then 41.
81. And 42 is the size. And so again, this is just applying the color, and then we're going to sort of paint it and pull it using our smudge tool again. So that's the colors that I want to get on there approximately. And then what I want to do is I want to get my smudge tool going again. Now the smudge tool, I'm going to push my flow back up again. My size, I'm going to get a little bit smaller because again, this is closer. So I'm going to have a little bit more details. And then I'm going to smudge these colors together in order to create an interesting hill. So again, you would like these different sides to sort of flow together and give it a little bit of interest in the way they go back and forth. The thing that I find always cool is that if you actually pull from the side, it'll pull white. And you want to try and stay away from that if you can. So when I get to the edge and I'm smudging things from the edge, I'll smudge outwards rather than inwards. And so that's the foothill in the very front. And you can see how the interest has been created by the way I'm pulling the different colors down. So you can see the pattern that I'm trying to work on this one here, just to give it a little bit of interest. And each one of these will just pull across like this to give it an opposite angle to what the mountain's doing. And that creates, again, a layer of interest. And then keep going, and we're just pulling all of this stuff together and giving you the rocks a little bit of edges and that kind of stuff to give it a feeling of foothills. So again, all I'm trying to do is just create a little bit of a rough texture so they look like rocks and they look like a hill. Now remember, last week when we were working, things that are farther away, the trees that we put in the background last week, we put them, the farther away they were, the lighter they were, and the less distinct the colors were, and the less bold the colors were. This is more of a cartoon style of drawing that we're doing now, and so you're going to end up with a very brilliant, almost all the way through the painting. But that's the goal, and that's what you want to try and achieve. But you can see, if you take away those other mountains, those mountains could sit by themselves the way they are now, if you take away the other mountains, but the other mountains kind of fit in behind, and because of the contrast of color, it gives them an interest. And that's where the blue at the top and the yellow sort of give you that feeling of the two of them fighting with each other. Because they're all the same brilliance of color, and that's one of the trademarks of this artist and the way he used to draw. Very bold and very solid sort of lines. So all I'm doing as I'm smudging this stuff together, I'm just trying to create a little bit more of a ragged edge on some of this to give you the feeling of these rocks and this weird striation that you would find in the rocks. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this just to see if I can get the colors a little bit more brilliant. And I did, which I liked. So I'm just going to merge these back together again. And then it will allow me to, again, to smudge a little bit more. And again, you can spend a lot of time on these rocks just to give it a little bit of like interest by pulling in one area and pushing out the other area. And so you can just build up the rocks so they have a little bit more interest to look at. How are we doing? Ready for the next step? Another layer. airbrush, large airbrush, 4.9. And we're going to move that down below everything because we want it to go into the background. And what we want to do is we want to see this layer right here, the one with the clouds and all that other stuff on it. We want to duplicate that color on the bottom half. So here's a trick using digital that you can't do in normal painting. Take that and duplicate it. Now that you've duplicated, you have two of them. Take the lower one, highlight it, go on to this 4 pointed cross at the top. So let me go back to that. Up here on the top bar, you'll see at the very top, it looks like arrows pointing in north, south, east, west. You click on that and you'll end up with transform. And the transform, what you want to do is you want to hit the middle one that allows you to do the bottom. So now what we've got is we've got water with the sky reflecting in the water below it. Do you want me to go through those steps again? So here we are. We take the lower, we doubled this first, so we duplicated it. Take this one. Hang on, I have to undo it. Take the lower one, highlight it. So you highlight this one. Go up to the very top. There's a little arrows and cross at the very top there. So this tool right here, just a minute, I'll get up and show you. So this tool right here is the one you want to press on. That tool will allow you to pull up this. And then what you want to do is you want to use this one, which will flip this down to the bottom half. And so when you click on that, what ends up happening is the top half, this stuff, all of a sudden flip down to the bottom half. So now you almost look like you have a beach at the bottom of that with the water in front of it. Or snow, or we're not too sure what we're doing yet. We haven't even picked a season or anything like that. So
did you duplicate the layer?
Sky?
Oh yeah, the sky.
Yeah. And then I go done, and now I have the bottom part. Which is kind of a fast way to get this majestic mountain showing through the middle with foothills and water. And now what we want to do is we want to go up to the foothills and build ourselves a little bit of a beach. So in order to build the beach, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into this tool and I'm going to go halfway in between the different colors. And then I'm just going to put in an area here that will be the bottom of my foothills. So you see how I put that layer in there? I just drew it straight across. And then I'm just going to pull that up so it sort of blends together. So now it has a little bit more of an edge. And now we have the edge of the beach or the edge of the water. And you just pull all this stuff down to sort of fill in the space. And you can come back and play with it later and soften it up or make it darker or whatever you want to do. But you mainly want to get this all sort of filling in here. It's starting to look like a deserted island type place. Jurassic Park Island. Okay, next layer. First, we're going to take the two bottom ones, like the sky and the water, and put those two together. Like merge them. We don't have 14 million layers, so all I did was I merged the two of them together. The thing that you may want to do now is we may want to show a reflection of the mountains in there and the foothills. And so we're going to do the same thing with the mountain. We're going to go up here and flip it. and then we're going to have to move it down. So the mountain shows up in the bottom part. Oh, done. I want to undo that. Excuse me. Sorry. First, you have to duplicate it. Duplicate it. Take the lower one, hit the star, transform it, and then pull it down. So now it's reflecting in the water. But because it's in the distance, I'm going to pull it up a little bit. And it's far enough back so the other stuff will cover it. So you want to try and match where it is based on the sky. And so you can see where the different sky is showing through. So that it actually would only show into about there, I would say. Now, if it's being a pain and it's showing a whole pile of stuff in the background, what you're going to do is go into this one and take your eraser and take off a whole pile of the top half stuff. And you can find out what that is by going here, and you can see the way that's sticking up. I took off the one mountain. Did you guys follow that whole step? Sorry, I went really fast through there. So what I don't like is I don't like that. Like I like this mountain and the way it's reflecting in the water, and it's only reflecting a little ways. But what I want to do is I want to take off the color, the mountain that is behind the other mountain. And so I take off the top mountain, and then I just erase this out of here with my eraser tool. And then put that back in, and then there we have the mountain reflected in there. What we don't have is the foothills reflected. So
Did you flip it horizontally?
Yep.
Okay.
And then we did the same thing with the foothills. So we go foothills, duplicate that, and take the lower one, and again, take it and flip it. Now we have to take it all the way down and put it as a reflection in here. Again, we pull it way up, go done, and then you want to erase all the area that is sitting too high. So from here up, I want to get rid of all of this. So here up, all the way across, I want to take all of this off and erase it. And what should end up happening is when I put that back in, you have a little bit of a, see where the way the light's shining through? And I like that, but I can also move this. If I don't like how much of the white I have showing through, I can take that one and I can just move it around by touching it and just moving it. Like that, done. And then you want to merge all of these together. So I'm going to take the two mountains, the blue mountains, I'm going to merge them together. I'm going to take the foothills, merge those two together. And now we're going to put some interesting evergreen trees in here. So we're going into green, really dark, dark green. So do you see where I'm getting my color from, you guys? And again, I'm using my marker. And we're going to put right on this shoreline, we're going to put some green trees in there that will hide some of the mountains, some of the foothills. And so right here on a new layer, I'm going to put a new layer in. I'm going to put in trees right here. So they're nice and solid and a weird shape. And they'll all come up one after another. And so you see how these are going to be like evergreen trees off in the distance. And it's his style of doing evergreen trees, but you don't want to lose some of the interesting stuff on your foothills either. So you just want to sort of put the pattern in like this. So you have these evergreen trees all sort of right along the thing. And they die down so that they don't go all the way across the middle. And then we're going to start them up on the other side as well. And again, we're creating these stylized kind of trees. And once you go with the dark green, then you want to go into this yellowy browny green color. So it's in this area here. So you want that color of green to give it a little bit more interest. And you're going to create some trees that fit in amongst these ones. And then we're going to fix that by going in and using our smudging tool again. We're going to change the size of the smudging tool because we're going to go really, really narrow, and we're going to move the flow way up, because now what we're going to do is we're going to try and turn these into evergreen trees, and I'll show you how we do that. Zoom in on the first one you want to start on, so it's this one, and you actually want to create a little bit more of an evergreen type of feeling to it. So you see the way that I took that one tree and just sort of butchered it all up and made it look like a tree. And so I'm pulling the dark into the lighter green to give it the forest feeling. So there's that light green showing through, and then the dark green we're turning into trees. And you can see the stylized system that he uses in order to create this. You know those are trees, but they're not really. Like when you look at them, like that's not really the way a tree you would paint a tree, but it gives you that nice stylized little effect to it. And once you've done all the dark ones, then you're going to come in and you're going to create trees from the lighter colored ones. But as you smudge, it pulls all these colors together. So you went from one extreme of green to the other extreme of green, and then you end up with a very interesting effect, because you end up with a tree with a whole pile of different green colors, because you took the darker green and the lighter green and blended them together. And you end up with a très cool, very nice batch of trees. Then you want to do the same thing with the lighter ones, so that they all blend together. So this is a slightly abstract style of painting, because you wouldn't go and say, well, if you just took this all by itself, people would have a hard time trying to identify that those are trees. But when they're put in the right place on a picture and they have the right style to them, then yeah, people will look at them and say, yeah, that's a tree. But it's only because of their location. If they were standing by themselves on a piece of paper, someone would say you need to learn how to paint, because that doesn't look like a tree unless you put it in the right location. And then you have this evergreen forest sort of showing up. And we're almost at the 1 hour mark, you guys, so we're going to take a little bit of a break here in a second. And you can continue, you can work through the break if you want to catch up, if you're behind. But the first thing we're going to do before we take our break is we want to put a reflection of these trees below. And so you're going to take that layer and do the same thing that you did with all the other layers. Did anybody have a problem figuring out how to do those layers? Like how to do the flipping of the layers? Okay, so this one here now, where I'm going to flip down, I'm going to duplicate it first, duplicate it, and then I'm going to take the lower one and I'm going to flip that, and then I'm going to move that right down so it shows there's a reflection. And again, I don't want it to be too deep into it. I want it to be approximately where it is. So what I did is I lined it up based on how high that tree is above the mountain. And so I matched it. And the reflections, I go done. And then I take off the top one, and then I erase all the stuff that I know wouldn't be there. So that's where that line in between the shadows allows you to show what should be there and what shouldn't. And so now I have the reflection of the trees in there. And so it's a very quick way to do reflections in a painting. But later on, I'll show you how you make it look even more like a reflection. And it's one of the last things we do. What we do is you come in with your smudge tool and you just smudge that straight across, and you'll end up with a little bit nicer of a reflection. But we still have to do a few other things here in the foreground. Okay. Take about a 5-minute break, you guys. Make sure you save a copy of this. As you're drawing, you always want to, like, at least every hour, you want to go in and you press that little square in the top left-hand corner on the top toolbar. You want to hit gallery and you want to do save the current sketch. And what it'll do is it'll save all this, the different layers that you have, and then you can come in and work on the layers or work on that painting again if you want later on. And then each time after that, I just save it as layers, like as copies, excuse me, and then I can go back in and fix it whenever I want. And so I'm going to take this off so it just sits there and you can take a look at it. This is where we're at so far, you guys. So you can go get a drink. There's a bathroom there. You can take a little bit of a break, stand up, stretch, move around a little bit, and we'll get started again in 5 minutes. You got a 5-minute break. If you want to continue to draw, simply because that's the way you take a break, then go for it. And I'll just check and see how our recording's going and seeing whether or not we're still on track. And say hello to the people on the World Wide Web, if there's anybody there. Oh yeah, there's some people still there. Very nice, very nice. Okay, so we're starting to get it. So if you were here last week, how was your drawings from last week? Did anybody do a little bit more work on theirs, or did they decide they didn't want to? You want to share and show us, or? So there's a few things that you need to make sure that you do. One, we're going to make this wash out a little bit. So this ends up with a little bit more of a reflection across the bottom. We're also going to put a white line or a little bit of a semi-white line in here so that you can tell the difference between the water and the background. And so that's something we're going to play with when we come back in a few seconds here. And then we need to make sure we do a little bit something a little bit closer in the foreground. And now you spend a lot of time on some of these different effects that we have up here. And so things like the trees and the sky and all that stuff, you can play a long time trying to make that better and more distinct and a little bit more interesting to look at. So I'm going to put mine down and I'm just going to put a little bit of a white line across that. Just because as I was looking at it, it was bugging me. And so I'm just going to put a little bit of a white line in here. And so you can see that then is the edge of the water. So do you see how I'm putting this just the white line across? And all that does is it signifies where the real stuff starts and where the reflection is. And so just by putting that little straight line of white across there, it gives you a separation between the two. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tree that is on the bottom and I'm going to blend it over top of the foreground. And the foothills. And then I'm going to merge those two in front of the mountain. So now I've taken all of those and merged them together. And I'm taking the trees and I'm merging that into there as well. Now the reason why I can do this is that we saved it. We saved it as a drawing already. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to make it look more like a reflection. So we're going to take the settings and do this level of setting. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to come across here and just mess up some of these reflections. So all I'm doing is dragging through this a little bit so it looks a little bit more like a cloud. A cloud reflecting in the water. And so going in, making the size a little bit smaller, flows a little bit less strength, and then coming in again, and then using a little bit of a lighter touch to it rather than that big heavy duty touch of creating it as a reflection. Okay, now we have a reflection in there. We're ready for our next layer, you guys. Again, we're using our marker. We're going to go into a brown, sort of this color of brown, and we're going to create an interesting area right here that we're going to put a tree on. And so this is the part that is closest to the water. Then we're going to go a little bit darker on top of that. And then we're going to go a little bit of a different color of brown on top of that. And this we're all going to turn into just a hill. So then all we're doing is we're creating this little bit of an island that we then soften up. So this is a whole new layer, and all it is an area in the front. Sorry, turn the strength back up on our smudge. Put the size back up on our smudge. And sort of smudge this together. Because this is in the foreground now, we can make it a little bit more distinct and a little bit easier to tell what it is. And so we're going to use a little bit of a pencil drawing now just to put a little bit more detail in this. And so you can see the way I'm pulling the color across just to give it a little bit more of a texture type feeling to it because it's in the foreground. And then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to smudge all that stuff out so it's not so evident that what I did, but I want it to be a little bit more interesting to look at. And we're going to surround that with a little bit of a white line so you know it's sitting in the water. So a white line through here. And we have ourselves our little island. But I don't like the way this is pointing up, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and smudge this down a little bit so it looks a little bit more level and in the water, like that. So now you've got a little bit of a smudge in there. You got a little bit of different colors, a little bit of contrast in between the different colors and all that other stuff. And now we're just going to put a big tree in the very foreground that's going to have this interesting look to it. It's one that they when he painted it, it was in Northern Ontario, and it was like up in the Muskoka area. And what it is it's an evergreen tree that was very wind blown. And so we're going to try and copy his style of doing that. And we'll see how it looks. and whether or not it adds to our painting or it doesn't. We're going to put it on a different layer, so if we don't like it, we can take it back off again. And so we're not going to try and copy his exactly. We're just going to put it the same type of technique of doing the tree that way. Okay, we're going to go with a reddish brown trunk. So you want to go a little bit more into the red, and you want to go down into this color. And we're going to put it on another layer. It's not even going to be on the island layer. So you can see how I just, if you're working with an Apple Pencil, if you take your Apple Pencil and you just, because this is a marker, it's wedge shaped, you can pull the different lines based on how straight up you put your pencil. If you want it to be wider, then you just sort of lean your pencil to the side, and you'll end up with a wider variation in these branches. So there you go. And I want to darken up one side of it just for interest's sake. So I'm going to go in here and take it a little bit darker red, and I'm just going to put that down the one side. And it's just to give it a little bit more of a interesting look to it rather than that rust color all itself. So you can see how I put the different colors on top of there. And then I'm going to find a real dark evergreen color. So like that. Do you want me to show you that again? Here's my evergreen color. And again, I'm going to work on creating an area that's going to be the evergreen tree that no one on this planet has ever seen before. And the nice thing is that if we get through all of this and we decide, oh, we don't like the way that tree looks, we can take it off. Nobody says we have to keep it. And so all I'm doing is sort of putting a little bit of green on the end of the branches. And then I'm going to come in with a lighter green to go on over underneath that. So I'm going to go into this color of green and maybe into there a little bit. And then I'm going to put that on top of there, again, just to help out with some of the interest on that tree. And the wedge from the marker is a great way to apply the paint really fast and give it a little bit of a texture. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with my smudge tool and I'm going to create an evergreen out of that. Push the size way down, push the flow way up. So 70s for the flow, the size at about 7. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into an evergreen tree. And so this is now going to look like all the little needles on an evergreen tree. Not on this planet, but on another planet somewhere. An alien evergreen tree. And then this becomes a focal point to your painting, which if it's real ugly, is not what you want. You may want to have that mountain in there. Now, because you're doing this on a different layer, I'll show you a trick here in a second. So do you see how it's almost looking, well, it's looking more like a palm tree than it is an evergreen tree, but we'll fix that in time here. So as we push it, push the different colors together. Again, because it's a layer all by itself, you're not pulling anything from the background. You're only working with the colors that you have attached to that tree. And so it sort of all comes together fairly nicely. But what I don't like is it's hiding too much of my mountains. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that evergreen tree, I'm going to hit that little cross at the top, and then I'm going to go like this. And I'm going to put my evergreen tree way down here because it was too big. I didn't like the way it was, and I didn't like the angle it was at. So I'm going to fix it and change the angle and put it like that. See, now I like it a little bit better, and now what I can do is I can just pull that up when I'm done. So now I'm done. Now I can work on this again and make it a little bit more interesting to look at. Zoom in a little bit, and let's make this look more like an evergreen tree. Zooming out. Do I like that tree or do I not like that tree? So that's a question you have to ask. Do I like it not on there or do I like it on there? I kind of like it on there if it reflects down into the water past it. So once I finish drawing it, I'm going to do the same thing for the reflection for that one. I'm going to flip it upside down, and then I'm going to have the reflection of it showing up in the water. But until then, I'm just going to keep pulling this green up so it ends up more like an evergreen tree. Because you see how solid the evergreen trees are behind that? And so what I'm going to try and do is get this one to be a little bit more like those. And that's simply by pulling it up and keep pulling it up until I have an evergreen tree. Changing the size and flow of my smudge tool will give me a little bit more interest when it comes to the way the evergreen branches are. Okay. Then let's take out some of this stuff so I can see what my tree looks like. We can leave that in there. Let's take this out of there. So there's what my tree looks like so far. Is it starting to look more like an evergreen tree? Starting to get there. Now the way I got to look at it is by taking everything off in the background so that I just have the tree and the sky and the water. And so now I can take this and continue to work at it until it actually turns into a really nice Christmas tree. When you're driving home tonight, I don't think any of you are driving, are you? When your parents pick you up and you're in the car riding home tonight in this cold weather, take a look at some of the evergreen trees and try and figure out whether or not, you know how people draw Christmas trees where they look like a bunch of triangles on top of triangles on top of triangles and it just goes down? Well, what you want to do is you want to look at an evergreen tree, actually look at it and look at the way they grow. A lot of times the evergreen branches grow up. They don't point down. And when people draw them, they always point the branches down. But the evergreens actually have the branches pointing up. And so, or a lot of them do anyways. So do you see how this is starting to look a little bit more like an evergreen tree as I start to pull more and more of the colors? And we start to have some different colors showing, and you end up with a little bit more of an interesting tree. And then I'm going to duplicate it and duplicate it again. So I have lots of color to it now. Do you see how solid it got when I duplicated it? Let's pull this down here a little bit more, and then we're going to end up with a wider base to it. And then I'm gonna put a reflection in the water below it by taking this and go duplicate, take the lower one here, flip it, pull this way down here. And there's your reflection. But you wouldn't have a reflection on an island, so I'm gonna go done, and take that tree off, and then I'm gonna erase the tree on the island, because the tree doesn't reflect on an island. Then I'm gonna put that one back, and then take my smudge tool, and I'm gonna turn this into a smudge a little bit more on the lower one. I'm gonna smudge it out sideways, so it looks like a reflection. Put some of the stuff back, so you can see what it looks like. Not a bad tree, but I want some lighter colored green on it so it stands out a little bit more from the background. Working on the wrong layer. So in a second here, I'm going to come around and take a look and see what you guys are doing so far. Seeing how it's coming along. I'm just duplicating my island as well, because I think I would like to have my island reflected a little bit. So I'm reflecting the island. Now the island you'll find doesn't work very well when it comes to reflection. You actually have to change the angles of things in order to make it fit. And sometimes it's more work than it's worth. And so I really don't like the way it works, so I'm just going to get rid of it because I don't like it. Okay, I'm going to come around and see what you guys got going. Can I see? Cool. Cool, good start. I like it. It's coming along.
Let's see.
How come?
I don't know. It's the first part.
You missed it.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. You're still there learning some of the techniques. You want to use you don't have it on here. What you want to do is you want to go when you have your brush up. You want to go here and go to library, and you want to go all the way down here to the smudge, and then you want that smudge brush. And so that smudge brush you're going to get. You can pull that right over and put it over there. And then you'll always have it, because that's the one I use a lot when we're teaching it. How you doing? Zoom in, let's see.
Cool. And let's see. Zoom in some, zoom in some. Not zoom out. Nice. Your clouds are gonna have to soften up. Your clouds look like Simpson clouds. But that's okay. It's coming together, you guys.
So once you get all your colors and stuff on there and you're down to this layer, I've decided I don't like my tree and I don't like my island. So I took it off. I just took it off by, I took it off this way, just by blanketing it out. I like the picture better like this. And so that's just a decision that as I made the tree, I didn't really like the tree a lot. And so I think I'm gonna make the mountain my focal point rather than a tree in the foreground. And so I'm gonna spend a little bit more time working on the lines of the mountain, so it becomes a little bit more interesting to look at. And I'm going to do that simply by zooming in and making the lines very distinct. So you can see what I'm doing here as far as taking the lines. And I'm using my smudge tool. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of make a little bit more definition in the mountains to make it look a little bit more interesting and make it the focal point. So I'm cleaning it up more than anything else and giving it a nice shape so that it will be a little bit more interesting to look at. And then it will become my focal point, or it will be what people see before they see anything else. So by taking the different colors and making sure there's a definite line between the dark and the light, you'll end up with a little bit more interesting shape in the mountains and a little bit more solid of a color. Because what I did is I really smudged it together and had a lot of bleeding edges. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the bleeding edges to make the mountain a little bit more sharp-edged angles. So this is our second week doing landscapes. And so next week what we're going to do is we're going to do an animal of some sort. Probably a bird for our first one because they're the easier ones to do. And so we're going to work on a bird and do some wildlife. So when you guys came in, you made sure that you all signed in when you came in, right? And logged in. You have to make sure you log in every single time you come into this facility so that they know who's been here and who hasn't. in case they have an outbreak of some sort, then they'll be able to track it and be able to tell people who was here and who wasn't. So we're almost at an hour and a half point. So we have almost, in about 5 minutes, we only have about a half hour left. And so if you're stuck on something and you need help, make sure you ask, and then you can finish your drawing when you get home. So you can see what I'm doing on the mountains a little bit now. I'm making them a little bit more cartoony and a little bit more solid colors, yet still having some blending going on and some interest being created by the different variations in the colors. So that again is the trick of using the smudging tool to create a nice balance of colors and to give it a different feeling than a lot of other people will be able to create if they're using a brush or something else. So you can see how these are sort of, now the mountains are starting to flow together a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll do the same thing to the trees. And so I'll take a tree and I'll make it a little bit more of a distinct shape. And so you can see the top of that evergreen tree now is becoming a very distinct shape, simply by pulling the different colors around it and creating some separation between the different colors that I got when I smudged it all together. And so it's almost like a discovery type thing, that you didn't plan on creating the tree this way, but you see how the tree starts to get the shape down and it starts to become a very distinct shape on its own. And that's simply by taking the different sections and pulling them in order to create a stylized method of creating a tree that you wouldn't be able to create in any other tool. So you can see how that tree that is right here in the middle of the mountains is starting to have this very distinct color variation in it. So I have this yellow spike that looks like it's coming down through the mountain, and then this blue one that comes down from this side. And as you pull all this stuff together, you'll start to see the different variations in the mountain that you'd like to include. And you make it flow almost like a water. And so when you spend a little bit of time on the painting, you can take these different aspects of it and create them a little bit more interesting to look at. And so I showed you an example of that the other day when I was here, and I'll show you again. I'm just gonna save a copy of this and I'll go back to it. So what you do with this painting once you start working on it, so you have all the different variations of it. This is one we worked on last week, the different examples, and then keep going. Do I even have a copy of that one on here? I should. Maybe I don't.
You passed it.
Which one are you thinking of? This one? This one is kind of the same style, and it's how you take them and you make very distinct shapes, but it's not the one I was thinking about. And then I did the same thing here to see how they're very distinct shapes in it, in the daisies. Oops, I didn't want that to happen. Oh, minor. Huh. I've lost it. Okay, I'll have to go back someplace else and look. Just give me 2 seconds and I'll find it for you.
Is somebody in this room?
What's that?
Is Connor in that room?
You can go knock, I don't know. I think he might be in that one. Might have to knock or push hard. Somewhere over the rainbow, somewhere. Don't want to do that. I want to find my painting. Where's my painting? Well, for goodness sakes. Can't find anything when you're looking for it. Just a minute here, let me go into.
Can I go on a quick break?
Yep. This one. So you can see the way this one was drawn. And this is what you're going to end up with by the time you're done your painting. The one that you're working on now. All you do is you take each one of the trees and you start to just pull the stuff so you have very distinct shapes to it. And then you end up with a very interesting pattern by the time you're done in your whole painting. And so we've got the basis to start this on the picture that we're doing now. And so you can see the way I did some of that. So I'm going to leave that up and running for a second. So you can see the way I'm starting to do that in the mountains. It just blowed up on me, and that's why you save it all the time. So you see how I'm starting to pull that, and you can see how, let's go into this tree right here. Like, just see how I started to do that with this tree? You start to make it into different shapes. So using the smudge tool, you pull each piece of this down into a nice little pattern. And so it has a nice smooth edges to it, and it pull it around, and then you end up with a very nice, smooth, interesting shape to look at. And then that's how you create your whole picture as you keep going through it. Now it takes a long time, and it's something that you just do slowly but surely build it up, and you don't rush it, and you just sort of build the nice little flowing shapes in order to create yourself a nice looking tree. And so this is almost too big, the setting that I have for this smudge tool. I may want to go smaller than that if I can. And then you pull the edges. And so it takes a really long time to do that kind of painting, but it gives you a really cool effect when you're done. And so this tree, which was just like a whole pile of different shapes and lines, now you're going to make it into actually very distinct shapes and pull it together in order to make a nice shaped evergreen tree. And so all you're doing is pulling the different lines together in order to create yourself a beautiful painting by the time you're done. It's almost like doodling, and it's one of those things that I like doing because it's calm, no brains. You don't have to think a lot. Once you get the basic shape down, then all you're doing is you're coming in here and you're just creating a picture out of it. And by pulling the different shapes, you'll end up with a real nice painting by the time you're done. But it's going to take you time, way more than what we had here today, but it'll give you have the basis now to start and continue to draw it until you get it to the stage where you want it to be. And so you can see the way this is all starting to flow together, making a really interesting, a real interesting tree. And then you're going to do the same thing with the mountains, and you're going to do the same thing with the foreground trees, and you have the basis to start that. And now you just have to continue and keep creating it. And so all I do is I keep zooming into different sections of it so you can see the way that tree started to look now compared to every other tree that's around. Take a look at that one tree. This one sitting right here, and how interesting that is compared to that mess that I have beside it. Right? And so I'm going to do the same thing with this one, where you just pull it up and you start building a shape out of it. And then this one here will end up just as interesting as that other one. It's just going to take a little bit of flow. Have to create a little bit of flow. And so this one is going to be as good a Christmas tree or as good an evergreen tree as that other one. It's just going to take me a little while to pull the different shapes together in order to create it. And so you just take each one of the angles, create the pattern, and continually add nice smooth edges to it. Take away some of the rough edges. And as you go across it, you end up with a really distinct looking tree by the time you're done. But it'll take a little while to make this tree look as interesting as the other one, because it was just a blob a minute ago. And that's where, once you get down to the stage where you have all the colors you want on there, then this is the fun part. It's just like doing doodles. You can't do anything wrong on it. And you just create a pattern. And so you're trying to create a nice tree here that has a very distinct shape to it. And it's just doodles. So you're pulling the colors, using the smudge tool, pulling the colors so that the evergreen boughs actually start to appear. So that's all you're trying to do, is take the different shapes, pull them together, smooth them out, make it interesting to look at. And that's the way you fix all your evergreen trees that you have in here, that we just sort of smudged in there and made look like a big mess. Then you have to now put the time in to create something of interest. And that's why when I said what we're going to do is we're going to create the mountain into the focal point. So you take those trees that are there, and you see how those trees start to look really interesting there on that. Now you have to do the same thing with the mountain. So you want to create each one of these things into a nice little shape. And so I'm going to take this and keep creating these different shapes in order to make the mountain look interesting. And by taking these shapes and pulling them, you're going to draw the viewer's eyes right to it. Okay, so now take a look at that mountain and how much that mountain's changed, simply because I took the time and put a little some different shapes in it in order to create a little bit more of an interest. So when you zoom out, your eye is going to get drawn to those two trees, the two trees and that mountain. So simply by doing some of the texture fixing, like what I just did there, you can make it very interesting. And then you can take your Simpsons clouds and you can turn your Simpsons clouds into a pattern and give it a little bit of softness, like what I've done to each one of these. So you're going to do this all over the whole page. is you're going to create all these different patterns of interest so that when you're done, you have a focal point, your eyes drawn upwards, so it's an uplifting kind of painting. For those of you that don't know anything about angles and stuff like that, anything on an angle creates motion. Anything that's straight across, like a horizon line or something like that, so the horizon line in the middle of the picture, that white line has to be almost straight across in order for it to calm the painting down. Otherwise, you're going to have too much motion. So you see that white line that I have on the shoreline? That calms the painting down and makes things stop from floating. But the mountain and everything else is pointing upwards, and so it draws your eyes up into the heavens, which is a good thing in a landscape. But you can see the pattern that I created right here. This is a part of my painting that I'm almost done. That section right there is starting to get finished because you're starting to see some of the patterns that you can have in your picture. Now you can see they're still not completed because they're not smooth all the way through, so it's going to take me another couple hours in order to smooth all the sections out. But in the end, you'll end up with a really nice little pattern in this mountain to draw people's eyes to it and to make it a thing of interest. Now, each week, I'll bring in a different style of drawing. And so remember, last week we didn't have anything like this at all. Like it wasn't an abstract so much as this one is. And so we went from being a little bit fairly realistic last week to this sort of a little bit more abstract type painting. And so next week we're going to do a wildlife, and we'll talk about, it'll be a slightly abstract one, and I don't know which bird we'll do, but we'll pick a bird and we'll draw something that you can get started again in the 2 hours, and then you can work on these afterwards. I have probably 100 paintings that I haven't finished. And that doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people. Like some people like to start and finish something. And a lot of this stuff, because we're only here for 2 hours, won't give you enough time to finish this thing. So you might end up with a whole pile of unfinished paintings because you'll be halfway through them or whatever, and you won't get a chance to finish them. But the goal of each one of the classes is to give you a start and an understanding of what the goal is, hopefully, and the technique that we're using. And then you'll find one that you'll really like, and that one you'll probably spend a lot of time finishing. But in the end, it's just fun to play and relaxing when the teacher isn't talking the whole time. Now that's a cool evergreen tree. We have about 15 minutes left, you guys. Time flies when you're busy creating. If there's a theme of something that you would like to learn how to paint or draw, I don't have a problem with you guys telling me or sending me an email saying, can we do this sometime? I don't mind that, and then I will try to design a lesson that will help you with that. But the nice thing is that each one of these will teach you a different technique or a different procedure that you can use in order to create probably the thing that you would really like to do. And so the idea is that each week you'll learn a little bit of a different technique. And then in the end, hopefully, it will make you able to create whatever you want. Anybody who's a self-taught painter always attempts to paint somebody else's work and looks at it and tries to figure out how they created it, and then you work on their technique and their strokes. And so this gentleman, Harris, has a really strange approach to creating landscapes. And so he was one that I thought I would try to mirror today, and we'll see how it turns out in the long run. I really like the style, and I saw his picture in our Mendel Art Gallery when there was a Mendel Art Gallery, and I really liked it. And that was about 15 years ago or 20 years ago. I saw it, and I remember it in my head, and so I wanted to create something that's very close to that, and so that's what we're doing today. And I'll try and find a copy of it somewhere or a picture of it somewhere so that you can see what I mean and why we're trying to do it. It's starting to look like a whale rather than a mountain. Maybe I should hide a whale in the mountain. We have about 9 minutes left, you guys. Okay, you see what I did on that, the foothills? All I did was I take the brown and I just pull brown down and create different shapes in there. And then what it does is it creates a very interesting eye-catching thing that when you zoom out, you can see how that hill looks totally different with the little fuzzy things all of a sudden. All it has is all the different patterns on there. And so as you're creating the different styles or the different approach to it, that just creates a little bit of interest and will draw somebody's eye to it. And then they'll find the picture a little bit more interesting to look at than what we've got up to this point. And so I started to do that on the mountains too. And I'll do the same thing with the trees, and you do it through the whole thing, and it will give you a nice looking picture at the end. But it takes some time to do. Now, a lot of people would have quit before they even started with all the little doodles, before I started with the little doodles, but now I could probably spend 30 hours on this painting just doing these little patterns and keep doing little patterns all over the place. And in the end, a lot of people will ask, like, how come you spent so long doing that? Like, did it add a lot to the picture? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I know what I've got now is that if I keep putting those patterns on there, and I'll try to get as much of it done by next week, you can see, get a chance to see what it looks like when I'm done and see if that adds anything to the picture and whether or not it's something you'd like to try to achieve. We're 3 minutes away, you guys, so you can start winding up. And if your ride is here,
Can I go grab my shoes?
they're in the front area.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll see you next week. So
My ride's here.
thanks for drawing.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Hope you learned something, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Yeah. Must be nice to have eyes well enough that you can draw on your phone. I'd end up having to get a magnifying glass. Getting old doesn't help you any. So I'm going to go to save a copy of it. Make sure you save a copy of it before you leave. What's that? The thing that you want to do is when you're working on an area of the painting, this is another thing that digital is so good at, is you can see what has to be fixed on that, right? You take a look at it and you see this little extra area here. You don't want that to be sticking out like that. And so you can zoom in and then you can really work on the details, and then it's easier to draw almost anything you want. So people say, like, all the animals I draw, how do you get the eyes to have all those details? Well, you zoom out so the eye is like the size of a mountain, and then it's easy to put little details in because you're drawn in really tight. And so the same thing, especially if you're working on the phone, you want to always zoom in and then zoom out, zoom in, and get really close so that you can work on the little details. And so both of these areas that I drew, like that mountain and this area here, I took the time and zoomed right in on it, right? And take your time to draw. The thing that always, like any of the students that I ever taught, they always want, like, what do I have to do to finish this? Well, you have to put some time into it. And that's what it takes. It's just, good art takes time, and you can't rush through things. So, like, people say, so how do you get your wildlife to look so real? Well, you have to draw every single hair. Like, you think the hair is just going to appear? You got to draw every single hair. If you want a lion to look like a lion with all its long hair, you have to take the time to draw it. And the same thing with this. If you want the pattern to be all the way through there, like these two trees here look really nice, but look at this mess you got beside it. Like, look at those trees. They don't even match. Like, these two look great. That one there looks ugly. And so I'm going to have to take some time to make that one look a little bit more realistic. And so that's all the fun of doing it, like, in time. And same thing with the clouds. Like, I could do the same thing with the clouds and create all of these into little patterns. And it'll be really cool to look at when it's done. At the moment, I don't like that cloud. It doesn't even look like a cloud. I don't know what it looks like. And so you can give it little patterns and little shapes in it, and then you'll end up with a really nice background on it. So,
I have a question.
of course.
Would you ever just like, cause I know you say you like to add like lots of details to everything, but do you ever just like say just looks like that?
And quit.
Yeah, just like
Yeah.
at the end there.
There's a lot of times, like, I will take a painting, like I drew a painting of a woman the one time, and it ended up real ugly when I had her hair on. And so what I did is when I was zooming in on it all the time, and when I zoomed in, I found out that, it looks good. Well, this one right here, like ugly face, didn't like it. And so what I did is I ended up doing this. Now that's cool. But it wasn't cool when I did this. And so a lot of times those are the things that when you're working on something, you'll find that, okay, I don't like this or I don't like that. Every single painting I've ever done in my life, I always see something that I don't like in it. That's the worst part about being an artist, is you're always picking at it, right? And so when you talk about do I do a lot of just pattern stuff? Like this is obviously details, like tons of detail, and took forever to do. But you don't have to do your paintings that way. And that's one of the things that people get stuck in a single style. Like this is a very loose style for drawing a bird. Like when have you ever seen bird feathers that look like that, right? Looks like I got hit by lightning. And so and this is called the graffiti style, and the artist who actually did the original of that one, and I just used his style and looked at it. But there's a lot of ones like this is a little bit more detail in it. This is very loose drawing. You don't spend a lot of time to get a lot of detail into that. And so this again is loose style. You don't put a lot of detail in it. Like if you took this by itself, took off just this area here, if you showed that to somebody, would they be able to tell you what the heck that is? Not in a million years, right? And so that's just a really loose style of drawing something. Now, obviously that, you can tell what it is, but was it necessary to have the nose in there and the eyes and all this stuff? No. It's just the idea when you're creating a lot of stuff is to create it a little bit looser. Like look at that, same thing with this one. Talk about loose drawing, right? You can tell it's a guy trying to serve a volleyball, but what the heck happened to him? He got hit by a crayon. And so you can spend hours like this one here, like take a look at the mountains of this one. You know how long it took to draw those stupid trees in the mountain? And how much work that was? And I don't even like it. The trees in the foreground I don't even like. And so you would take off the trees in the foreground. This isn't bad, but the sky's ugly. Now the mountains are really nice, so you can go back in there, and the nice thing is that with the different layers, you can take off, like, stop close. So that tree is not bad, but even the tree is not that good looking. So take that off, take that off. So that tree, could you use that tree in another painting? Maybe. Like it's got a neat effect to it. Could I use that on the painting we just did? Yeah. And the nice thing about this is like when you're using these, if you went here and go to share, you could go copy, get out of this one, go all the way back to the original painting. So discard changes. You go all the way back to the very first painting. The painting we're just working on. All the way back to here. And go right on this one. On there, I'd like to put in, there's paste on here. There's my glasses. So there's my evergreen tree. So then you can put the evergreen tree into this painting simply by going in here. Now the white you're going to have to get rid of, right? So then you'd have to go in there with your eraser. So you go done, and then you take your eraser or whatever and go in there and take all of this off. This would probably move. So I'd go out of there and I'd go here and I'd move this down here. And could I put it right there on this painting? Yeah. Would it add anything to it? Maybe. But then this is a real pain to do the And so there's lots of elements of different paintings that I've done that you can actually put together. So that was kind of a cool tree, and it may fit in this painting. Would it fit? I don't know. Probably not. Wrong color.
It's kind of detailed for the rest of it.
But it's closer, right? And things that are closer always have the more details than things that are farther away. And so the color isn't so bad. It's obviously not the greens like this green trees are. And because I'm starting to get into more of a stylized doodle type style, then that's too realistic and it doesn't fit. But you're right, like what you just said is something that takes time to learn, like what fits together and where does the light come from. The light doesn't match that as it matches this stuff. And so you have to make sure that your light always is there, and you have to make sure your focal point is there. You know how I put that first tree on there and I said I didn't like that tree and I took it off? Well, that's an important decision to make sometimes when you put it in a painting. Now, will I put it back? Maybe if I took this one and created it like these ones here, could I make it part of that painting? Yeah. Would it add something? Possibly. But it's the wrong style for the rest of the painting. And so it's better to not put it in there. So when you talk about the loose style of painting something, like when you don't have a lot of details, you just sort of have an impression of it. There's lots of paintings where I've done it and it's just an impression. But it's a harder thing to do because you have to be able to paint something and know what not to put in. Not what to put in, what not to put in order for your mind to be able to fill in the gaps. And that just takes time to learn. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I'm already here. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Hopefully we'll see you next week.
Good. All right. Have a nice night.
Yeah, likewise. Let's see what's going on here and I'll shut this down. We can end the stream.